No, it's actually probably the worst time in history to be building a CSGO team. The price tags couldn't be higher. The contracts couldn't be more secure. The major's been postponed, so it means we're locked into RMR point situation. This probably is the worst time to try and build a team, especially from the ground up. And to be fair, I've done a pretty good job, I don't mind myself saying, because I've been doing this for 1 month and I've managed to sign 4 players.
Alrighty, welcome to Geographically Challenged episode number 18. It's a busy week. There's a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to stuff around with the intro like I normally do. You can see we've got Pili and Bleh back again as per usual, although Bleh has been missing a few. He's been chucking a couple of sickies. Luckily today we have convinced HenryG to join us, so very much appreciate you taking the time, Henry, to jump on and twat it up with us, as you so eloquently put it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I thought you guys, you seemed like to be on a similar level and wavelength to me when I watched your videos and stuff. So I thought I'd come on. Like I said to these boys in the pre-show, before we came on, I looked at your topic of discussion. I might be the worst guest for your type of show ever. Not really knowledgeable in your scene, but I'm going to learn and try to give what I can here. So
that's fine. Yeah, because we are, to be honest, we sort of tried to mold the episode a little bit around you, which is what we like to do when we have a guest. So for anyone that's really just here for the Henry segments, you can jump forward. We've got the links in the description. They'll probably be coming in halfway through. That's where we jump into a bit more of like the Q&A and a bit more of the broad sort of general discussion topics. As usual, when we're going to start things off here, we'll go from the top with some of the news that's been happening within Asia and Oceania. And the first cab off the rank for today is going to be ESL Pro League Season 12. Now, the results have just come in yesterday night. Pili was casting that. I had to miss it, unfortunately. Had to do some Overwatch, but we've all got to eat, so here we go. Look, the results, though, to be honest, are not that much different to normal. I haven't really missed much, have I, Pili? We've got Renegades, we've got Tyloo. They've won it again, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah, I think actually in terms of the Asia games, the upper bracket game between Vici and Tyloo was a lot closer, and Vici could have won that. And, you say that the predictions don't matter at all, Jordan, but unfortunately, none of your Vici predictions came true this time again, even though no matter how bad you want them to win, they never seem to be able to. And I think both of the grand finals were pretty one-sided. It was basically just like one good map from like the underdog team, whether it was Order or Vici, and then the rest of it was really, really one-sided. And unfortunately, when you do lose that upper bracket match to the team that you want to try and upset in the grand final and actually win the whole competition, it's just going to make it so much more one-sided. The team's already got a better map pool than you, and then they get a one-map advantage. It's like, may as well just call it.
Okay, I want to throw this one to you then, Henry, right? Because I think as a general, thing, Counter-Strike globally has been... There's this whole discussion about the game becoming stale from an esports standpoint. We're seeing the same thing over and over and over again. The same teams recycled. But we get that to an even greater extent within Oceania and Asia. So I don't know how much you're watching at the moment. I assume you're watching a fair bit, maybe not Oceania and Asia, but are you feeling things are getting a bit stale? And how would you feel about casting the same 4 teams for 9 months straight?
Hey, my heart does bleed for you boys. Towards when I did do the online kind of season, I was like when we did the first wave of it, when it was like we did Road to Rio and we did Pro League back to back. That was crazy, and that was like we obviously had 32 teams, but it's just like the same matchups week in, week out, every single day, 6 days a week. And although it was great to be working and like having money coming in during those times, it was just like in terms of the Counter-Strike we were watching, it was clear the teams couldn't really be bothered anymore. You could see the quality really dropping off because they were obviously burnt out. And in terms of our kind of enthusiasm, it certainly wasn't there either. For us to actually continue to actually bring a good show in, we had to fuck around a bit more, to be honest with you. We had to kind of liven things up with some gags and try and make things a bit more interesting. So I'm assuming you guys probably have to lean on that a bit more as well, especially when you're doing things like Pro League. Yeah,
maybe a little bit too much. I'd suggest some people aren't too pleased with it, but look, I think it's entertaining, so it gets me by, which I suppose is the main thing.
So how many teams do you actually deal with right now then in Pro League? How many have you actually got?
4.
To just literally 4. I thought that was
no.
It's not really a league at that point, is it? So what?
Yeah,
there's just one winner. That's it. At the end. Yep.
It's the same thing with every tournament, man. It's like whether it's DreamHack or Pro League. That's like you talk about different tournament brands kind of feeling like the same thing. For us, it literally is the same thing. Like whether it's a DreamHack or a Pro League or an IEM or whatever qualifier, it's like same 4 teams, throw them in a double elim bracket and see how we go.
So are there other teams outside that are competitive, or is it just the 4 top runners?
I mean, Bleh's shaking his head. I think in Asia, you might be able to make an argument, not for the top end. There's always going to be Renegades and Tyloo winning, but you could make an argument that like Tiger deserves an invite over Beyond or BTRG or one of these other Thai teams, something like that, just to throw a bit of spice in the mix.
A Thai team. I haven't heard of Thai Counter-Strike ever, to be honest with you. So I'm interested. I'm all for it.
Well,
at one point you might have been able to hear of it, like it was actually starting to become a thing, and then Valorant, it basically just exodus the whole scene. It's just like they all just pieced out, basically.
I was going to say, you guys must be suffering from the Valorant cull as well, I'd imagine. It seems like, obviously, North America's been gutted. What chance did you guys stand? There must be a lot of your talent being shifted over.
Yeah. Actually, is it really happening, though? I mean, I know for a fact nothing's really changed in China. Like, if you're talking about the best teams in Asia and CSGO, it's mainly the Chinese guys. No one's shifted to Valorant in China. It's mainly been Japan, South Korea. We have the old MVP PK guys. We got the who are the guys? The Absolute guys from Japan, right? They're playing with Jupiter. They're pretty good. In Southeast Asia, I think it was already dying before Valorant even became a thing. And then these guys are like, oh, there's a new ship to jump onto. But these are the same guys still playing shitty Counter-Strike, moving into a new game, still playing a shitty approach to the game. Unfortunately, it's a fact. I saw some of the games. I saw the.
You don't sound salty at all, dude. It's fine.
I'm not salty at all. It's just it's just a rough time. But overall, if you look at the Chinese scene, I don't think it's really changed much. I think like the Tyloo's, Vici's, everyone's full on CS right now.
I would make the argument that the Chinese scene is actually doing better than it has been really ever. I think that you're starting to see more teams kind of come through from China, not to a competitive level in terms of challenging the likes of Tyloo and Vici, but there are more teams and the depth of the region, and we've got some new players coming through as well, which is kind of interesting, and they're sort of starting to filter their way into the likes of Vici and Tyloo with people like Jam Young and Slowly and Danking, etc. Although, Danking's been around for a little while. Those other guys have been too, but not in those top 2 teams. Anyway, speaking of those 2 top teams, I want to run a bit of a thought experiment here with you, Henry. And
sure.
I want to get your opinion on something which we have greatly at length discussed on this show in the past. Now, I want to do this from a hypothetical perspective, and we'll see if you can pick up on what I'm trying to allude to. I'm sure Pilsky and Bleh will be able to pretty quickly. So let's just say the year is 2021, and you've created your Cloud9 super team. And you continue to meet Team Liquid with your buddy Moses in the grand final time and time and time again. Online Counter-Strike is still a thing. But you two are the 2 best teams in the region. Now, initially, you start the year, Cloud9 wins a couple of tournaments. You're looking pretty good. But then Team Liquid makes a couple of roster changes. They bring in 2 young new superstars and start to destroy you over and over and over and over again. We get to October. It's the 7th of October, 2021. You have now lost 13 series in a row to Team Liquid. At what point are you deciding to make a roster change? Or are you still having faith that your roster can potentially make it happen in the grand final?
It feels like a loaded question. I won't lie to you. But I suppose I'd have to take the statistics of each game and have to look at them and see whether I thought there was a specific problem within my team. But to answer your question and play along, I guess I'd probably say about 10 before I would start to make changes. So what is the real life example of this?
Well, the real life... Yeah, it's not hypothetical, although in obviously Cloud9 Team Liquid it is. But for Tyloo and Vici, this is very much a reality. Vici won Road to Rio, the Rio minor qualifiers, I should say. They won the minor qualifier. They came first seed out of Asia. Then Tyloo makes these roster changes. They got rid of Freeman, they got rid of Zeta, and they brought in Slowly and Danking. And ever since then, they have basically shit-stomped Vici. Every single series we watch, and this is one of the major problems with the region, right? Not only do we only cast 4 teams, we get the exact same teams in the grand final over and over again, and we get the exact same result over and over again. To be fair to Vici, they sometimes make it close. They have been within 1 round of actually winning one of these grand finals, but they've lost 13 in a row. So, look, they just lost another one yesterday, Pilsky. I know it's a discussion we've had over and over again, but surely now, especially given the fact that there's no RMR points, I mean, there are, but they don't necessarily seem to matter when there's no major. Like, now is the time, if not 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago.
Yeah, I think so. And just the thing is, even to dig in further to that Vici discussion is like they have had the same roster for ages. Like I think the only player that they changed was like Jam Young and it's come in for Freeman, and the core four has been the same for like years since then. So it's definitely a hard time for a roster change. I think we were talking about it ages ago. Just to even build on that, to like a bit more background for Henry is that, I mean, he I don't know if he probably was casting those EPLs where Tyloo was playing with Freeman and Zeta. Well, the team that qualified for those was actually Vici Gaming, but they couldn't go to it because of their visas. So even back then, they were beating Tyloo at that point in time, and it's like they lost.
Who are you saying then Vici then would need to be replaced at this point for it to actually be a compelling sort of change? Have you got recommendations or players you have in mind?
Well, see, this is a hot discussion topic as well.
Yeah.
You know, we've gone around the block with this one. We've all sort of thrown our 2 cents in, and at the moment, to be honest, guys, I'm kind of feeling like it has to be Advent. I think you got to get Advent out of there. Initially, I started on the I hate Orman, I hate Zoking hype train, but to be honest, I think Advent now is not delivering enough as an in-game leader to warrant his selection in that roster, and you could just move him to that coach role, bring in someone else. I know there's a few decent IGLs in the Chinese region. Whether or not they work within the Vici system, in that ecosystem, whether there's a clash of, you know, culture or what have you, I don't know, but I think Advent's the one that's got to go, in my opinion.
I have to agree with you on that. I have to kind of disagree with the fact there are good in-game leaders in China right now. I don't think there are any good in-game leaders.
Can we bring Bondic back to the region?
I don't know. Does he still want to come back? Like at this point, I'm not sure.
Hey, to be honest, that Russian-Chinese sort of mix experiment hasn't gone too bad. There's even like the IG team before this one that had like 2 Russians playing with 3 Chinese guys. You know, sometimes you chuck a Russian in a Chinese team, they start fragging, man. It's crazy.
Wow. I like that.
Anyway, so look, I reckon Xiao, you take him off Invictus, put him in Vici, could work, maybe. Impression, by the way, he just moved to NG, but he speaks Chinese. What about him? Few options, that's all I'm saying. Maybe they're not good options, but they're options. TLDR is I think Vici needs to make a change. We haven't really touched on Renegades, but again, this is now their 7th or 6th tournament win in a row. It doesn't really need to be said. I think we can just scoot past that. It's just the same old within the Oceanic region. So let's move on from the ESL Pro League Season 12 results and move into what we have just alluded to there, in that Impression, alongside the majority of this BTRG roster, have just moved on from that team, that organization. So if you're not aware, Henry, this is a bit of a mixed team within the Asia region. You might have heard of Xccurate, you might have heard of Xign, you know, a few guys that...
What Impression?
Yeah, they've been around, right? But they haven't had the results. They've been kind of bad for the level which we thought that they would hit with this kind of a roster. Anyway, it turns out that BTRG hasn't been paying them, so very similar to the whole Boot debacle back in the day when Boot moved on from Boot. So, I don't know, is that an excuse, Blair? Like, do you think that this has been something that's lasted longer than maybe these payment issues are a thing? And are you happy to see them leaving this BTRG team and seeing if they can sort of make something happen in whatever NG is?
Look, I get that. Excuse me. I get that payment issues and org issues might be a problem factoring into the performance, but honestly, I don't think they were really that good as a team. Initially, you look at the players, you look at Xccurate, you look at Xign, you look at Impression, you're like, hey, you know what? Maybe this team could do something. But let's be real, nothing really panned out of it. And yes, I know Impression said how some of the roster lineup changes was something which was out of his control, etc., yada yada yada. But he hasn't really done much. What event has BTRG won? Have they reached the finals of any event? Have they been able to beat Tyloo or a Vici or even a fucking Invictus or Tiger convincingly? These are like the top 4 teams in the region, and they haven't come close in the past year or so. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, the payment issues and all of that. It always sucks to see all of it, but honestly, it looks like they're kind of recreating the same experiment with this new team, with this new org, NG in Thailand. But until they do something, I'm still going to have my doubts.
Okay. All right. Pilsky, any thoughts? I just want to point out, by the way, that Impression and now Xign are confirmed for this NG roster. As of yet, we don't know if Xccurate's going to join, though it is my suspicion that he will. I think that core 3 from BTRG is a nice platform to build from. But we had a viewer question, and I was going to do it later, but we may as well do it now. And I might throw this at you, Pilsky. Who do you think the next two players? If it's not Xccurate, or let's assume that it is Xccurate. Aside from Xccurate, who do you think the two players could be to join that NG roster?
It should be Xccurate again. I would hope, and I would want them to get someone like Freeman. You know, if they're going to poach some players, maybe from Paper X, that would be awesome. Like if they could try and poach like Devai or Benkai or something like that, that would be really, really good additions to the roster. And I would probably just say the same thing about BTRG. Like, you know, if you've got players like Xccurate and Xign on your roster and you're failing to make it through to the open qualifiers to tournaments, like I know you're having payment issues, you're having org issues. There's a lot of other like teams in Asia that are outperforming you in these qualifiers that don't have nearly as much experience or like firepower as your team. And I'm sure they're not getting paid a sick salary or anything like that. And they're consistently making it, you know, further in the qualifiers. What about like a Bren or something like that, you know?
Yeah. All right, Henry, do you want to chime in here? And maybe not necessarily from a should they have gotten this done or not kind of a perspective, sure, but maybe from a payment kind of a perspective, how much of an impact do you think that would have?
What's the context there? Is it that the org has been fucking them over, so they're not getting paid at all, or there's been a breach of contract? Well, what's the actual deal there? Do you know the specifics?
I wouldn't go so far as to say I know the exact specifics, but from Impression's statements and what he said, they had stopped getting paid, and they were still playing under the BTRG organization. So
yeah, I guess it depends how long they've been a team for and what their goals are. Like, it obviously isn't going to help. You're going to be frustrated. People are not going to turn up and put the same hours in, especially like, why are we trying if they're not even going to pay us sort of thing? Like, I wouldn't want to be preparing just for the team's honor, etc. You're still representing that brand, etc. I don't know. Maybe it could be something that's very frustrating. So I obviously haven't watched the games, but I can imagine that having a significant impact, at least, as having that like on your shoulders every time you go into the game, knowing that you're not going to make any money from it, essentially wasting your time. That's going to be very frustrating. So yeah, it definitely is a contributing factor, I would say.
Indeed. Well, hopefully things go well for them. I think we'll probably have a bigger discussion around this NG roster in one of the upcoming episodes when we've got a bit more time and when we have a better understanding of who's actually going to be on that roster. So if that's something you're interested in, it's probably not in this episode. You might have to stick around for the next couple. Let's move on because, again, we are really cracking through the topics today. We've got Soju stepping down from Chiefs. Now, this is probably one that Pilsky is going to have the most 2 cents on. He cited a lack of time to commit and some individual circumstances as to why he stepped down from this roster. And to be honest, to me, Pilsky, it is a bit of a shame, right? We only just saw this roster coming together, starting to play with Vexite, and now all of a sudden they're back in the bin.
You can hear me, right? It seems like my camera's just messing around. Yeah. Look, to be honest, the good thing is that Soju is kind of like a role player in Chiefs, and he's a role player in a lot of his teams. So those are the kind of players that, they're replaceable. And if your, more firepower heavy players are sort of performing just as well, yeah, you're going to feel it in terms of the overall team cohesion and stuff like that. But I would say that, they're a newer roster, Chiefs. So it's better to be replacing one of those sort of filler pieces now rather than later down the line when they've sort of invested a lot more time and practice in it. They're still a very fresh roster. Hopefully, if they can find someone half decent, which I've heard some of the people they're looking at, there's some okay players out there, but I think they've already still got enough talent to be quite a good team at the moment.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't want to have, again, a massive discussion about that because I think we've got some more pressing topics to discuss. Now, this is one that might be a little bit more interesting for more of our global viewers, the ESL ranking update. And this is largely pertaining, actually, I felt, to the Oceanic and Asian region. It seems to have had the most impact on us and maybe to an extent the CIS region as well. It's more of a negative impact, I would say, for Europe and North America, but we can get your 2 cents on that in a moment, Henry. But basically the TLDR for this is that ESL, with their world rankings, have released a statement, said they've wanted to more or less fix some quote-unquote fundamental flaws to the ESL World Rankings, which is something that we have been fairly vocal about actually within this region, and it's something that was fairly obvious right from the outset once this was a thing, that the Asian and the Oceanic teams were just not getting enough points out of the games that they were playing for it to be relevant.
How could they possibly get points, though? Like, because you have to play all the tournaments, right? You get points from playing in everything. So, but you guys only have, a handful of tournaments per year to even go through. So how could you possibly ever make the points full stop? Like, how would you ever do that?
Exactly. That's the problem, right? And the thing is, the lower down the teams drop, the less value those matches then inevitably go on to have because their points are lower. So it's a downward spiral, which...
It's like Elo hell down there, right?
More or less.
Quite literally, yeah. That's rough.
Yeah. Pilski, just by the way, I know everyone's looking at your camera and we're seeing the issues. I will fix that in the edit, so don't worry about it. Every time it pops up like that, it's just because you have bad internet. So back on track. What's essentially the result of the updated rankings is now Renegades is sitting in 24th, Advanced 30th, Order 37th, blah, blah, blah. We go all the way down the list, and even teams like Ground Zero are now in the ESL World Ranking. I will say it's not a perfect fix just based on the eye test to me. Like, I look at this and I think, okay, are Avant and Order genuinely better teams than Tyloo? Is Rooster a better team than Vici? I would probably go so far as to say no, they're not. But it seems like the Oceanic tournaments are being given a bit more of a weighting than the Asian tournaments, which is a little bit funny to me. What do you think about this though, Bleh? Because I know Pilski's opinion, and I think we'll be quite interested to hear Henry's opinion as well a bit later on. But I want to go to you first, because
I'm not...
It's strange, isn't it? Like, that it's gotten to this point. But is this a good fix, or is there something wrong with this?
I think it's a good fix, except for the entire emphasis being more for the Oceanic teams. Now, I'm not sure if that's a fact. Is it because they play more ESL-related events compared to some of the Asian teams? I don't know. I think so, right? And if you look at, just like you said, from an eye test, apart from Renegades, I don't really see any of the other teams really beating a team like, let's say, a Tyloo or a Vici, just based on what I've seen so far. Sure, teams like Order, Avant might give a fight to Tyloo or Vici, but yeah, it's kind of a little wonky for me personally. And if it is purely reliant on the ESL events being, which these teams play, it's obviously going to be more biased towards the Oceanic teams, right? Like the Asian teams, apart from maybe 2 or 3 teams, look at the qualifiers that happen for Pro League, for ESL One, Cologne, all these events. You get like 4 invited teams, no open qualifiers, nothing. It's kind of unfair, but I feel like it's a right idea. I like the approach you're doing here. I think it's good to give a little bit more emphasis for the wins for the games that these teams do play. But yeah, it does. I wish they had a few more events, a few more open qualifier events for the Asian region, which is something we've spoken about time and time again, which ESL should hopefully take a look at, maybe.
All right. From your perspective then, Henry, does this concern you at all, maybe, to see, from what it looks like to me, the Oceanic and the Asian teams are getting a bit of a leg up over some of the tier 2 or the tier 3 European, North American CIS kinds of teams? So is that concerning to you from just a, I don't know, maybe like a global standpoint? Your mic is muted, by the way.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a solution, but it's by no means a perfect one. I don't think there is a perfect solution for this problem, unfortunately, especially with... I don't know what the deal is right now if you don't want to go into COVID and stuff like that, but you guys, even if there was an opportunity to go to an event, like, you can't even presumably leave the continent right now, right? So there's so many different facets of this whole thing going on right now. But in terms of the points and stuff, it seems great that you guys are getting a bit more recognition, but I feel like that the system's still flawed in the sense, like, the amount of tournaments you have to play, even within Europe, just to stay relevant and just get yourself racked up in terms of those points, it just seems exhausting. And I feel like with the online play we have right now, having to play in all those tournaments that are now like 2-3 weeks long sometimes, like, it just seems like that's part of the problem. You need to play the tournaments to get the points. So if you stay within the ESL system playing all those tournaments, sometimes that's not enough. If you don't do well in all of them, you've got to play everything else outside that as well, just to keep racking points up and trying to contribute yourself in there. So I don't know. It's not a system I've really looked into. Now, obviously, we're a Flashpoint team, so it's not like something I've read into in a great detail, I'll be honest with you, so I don't really have a massive opinion on it. But yeah, it seems like it's a good change, at least, but like I said, it's not a perfect solution. I don't think there ever will be for this sort of problem, especially when we're playing online Counter-Strike primarily. It's just going to be a Band-Aid for now at best.
And I think one things that does concern me a little bit about it as well is that it does miss a lot of tournaments, particularly from the Asian region. Now, that's what you were sort of alluding to, Bleh. At least as far as Australia and New Zealand is concerned, the majority of relevant Counter-Strike is actually ESL tournaments like Pro League, ANZ Champs, DreamHack tournaments, that kind of thing. But as far as Asia is concerned, it has taken into account the Weibo Cup result from back in the day when Tiger won. That's why I think Tiger's rated quite highly compared to someone like, for example, Invictus, who at the moment seems to be a little bit better than them. But it's missing out a lot of the other tournaments that, get played domestically within Asia. And yes, there is going to be an argument that maybe some of those results can be a little bit sus at times, but is it an accurate representation of the region? I'm not so sure. And again, it is never going to be a perfect fix. But I will say credit to ESL. I think this is actually a beneficial change, at least for our region. I can't comment so much on Europe and North America, and I'm sure there's a few teams from there that are thinking, well, what the fuck? Why are we ranked below Tyloo? Why are we ranked below this Rooster team? How is Rooster 40th in the world when, like, who even are those guys? That may be a fair argument to make, but either way, at least for us, we're pretty happy. Anyway, that's most of the Asian topics jump through.
Before we move on, how did you guys get on with the CS PPA rankings in terms of the Asian teams? Where did you stack up there?
I don't even think there's any Asian teams on that.
Okay, well, that's not that.
I'm actually going to Google it.
Yeah, have a look. I mean, this because that's just for context. And I was watching. That's kind of voted for by the teams themselves, but none of the teams play against the Asian teams or the Australian teams, right? So how are they even going to have context as to how good they are? They're not going to watch those games. I'll tell you that right now. So
well, Renegades are on 34. There's not a single Asian team over there. Not a single one. So that's
interesting. To show you how that kind of flaws in that system as well. It's just because if the players voting on it don't play against those teams, they're not even going to consider them, right? They're not looking at the bigger picture. So that's flawed for this region especially. So that doesn't work.
All right. Well, that might actually be a great transition and a great segue into our first sort of Q&A topic. Now, these are probably a little bit more interesting for you, Henry, and for some of the international viewers that are maybe tuning in for the first time. So it's great to have you all here. Welcome. Now, the first question that I have, the first lot of these questions is the ones from us, then we'll get into some viewer questions and stuff. So this one is directly to you, Henry, and more from a global perspective as well. So anyone that you know, just the scene in general. How much do you guys actually watch Asian and Oceanic Counter-Strike? How much do you even care about it? Is it something that international teams are looking at a whole lot? I mean, how much do you just generally tune into Asian and Oceanic Counter-Strike?
Yeah, I'll be real with you. When we had tournaments and when we had LANs and stuff, when we had the Asian teams coming over for the first times, we had like Tyloo, MVP and stuff, like it was super exciting. That was like, we were really hyped at the prospect of what these teams could become. Like some of the names from 1.6 were still there, etc. And we had some of the kind of young guns and it looked like there were some really exciting players. And unfortunately, probably for the same reasons you guys are a little bit jaded with the whole thing as well, it just never really came to fruition. We never had a solid top. We never had the kind of poster boys. It was always just like Tyloo. They were good for about months once upon. But just always the boys that would come over three, and that would be the end of it. And it feels like we're in a very grim state of affairs in terms of once we've gone now to this online situation, as well as I was alluding to earlier. Now, unfortunately, I don't think anyone's really going to be looking at it because there's no prospect of them playing against our teams at any time in the near future, right? So we don't really need to check out what's going on, who are the exciting players, because it doesn't really have any sort of knock-on effect to what we're doing over here. So to answer your question, in like the most honest way I possibly can, back in the day when they were traveling over and we were actually getting the chance to see them, and then we'd be super hyped and they'd leave, definitely used to watch. Used to see what they'd be up to. We used to stay up and actually watch the games after Pro League and stuff. But now, especially when I'm not really involved in commentary, there's no real reason for me to. These teams aren't going to be a threat to us in the near time. So in terms of Renegades, I definitely watch them from time to time. They've got a big fixture as a final coming up, but that's about it. That's more brand power, I'd say, of the kind of organization, some of the names within there. Like I'm a big Dexter fan, for example, so that's cool. But apart from that, I guess no would be at this point. I don't watch it now because there's no real teams I really want to get behind in that sense.
Would you say, and this is from my perspective, it seems that globally there is less hype around Asian Counter-Strike than there was 3 to 5 years ago. If you remember when that whole CSGO to Asia thing was sort of blowing up, it seemed like everyone was full keen. But now it's just like, well, who really gives a shit about Asian CS? Is that the same from your perspective as well?
Yeah, I guess that's probably fair. I want to come across as the nice guy, of course, but I think at this point, there's no teams I'm really hyped about. It seems like there's this constant roster issues or lack thereof in terms of not making changes from what I've heard from you guys. It just doesn't seem like anyone's just really popping off, like it seems like it's going through the motions and cashing in the paychecks, and no one's really stepping up and like really challenging to look dangerous in the future, at least. Like I haven't heard anything about Tyloo's prospect of, wait till we come back to land. These guys are looking shit hot right now. Like there's been nothing like that. So it just seems that they're just getting through it. And I guess for me, no, I don't really care about it right now.
Just to add on to what Henry said as well, like we've always had this this caveat that, oh, we're not getting enough support, oh, no, it's not enough events, et cetera, bloody, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like at the end of the day, the players just aren't, like Henry said, they're not just committing enough, right? Sure, just death matching 100 hours a week, that's not good enough. You need to play Counter-Strike the right way. You need to approach it from a different angle, from a better perspective. But it's been what, 4-5 years since Tyloo came to Malmo. They had a few big upsets to reach the playoffs ever since, and there's been nothing. There have been so many events, a lot of money injected, a lot of orgs coming in, so many chances given, and the only thing we have from that is Bntet leaving Asia and getting picked up over by Gen G. Good for him, but apart from this, there's nothing else. And I feel like at one point you just have to put the onus on the players. What are you doing? You've been given all these opportunities, and unfortunately, you haven't really elevated your game plan, your game approach since 2016, 2017. So it is what it is. You have to put the blame somewhere, and I'm going to put it to the players.
All right, well, we are going to have a bit of a discussion about Bntet as well, but Pilsy, I know you had a bit more of a question around the opinions and perspectives of Asia and OS in general. Was that enough to answer your question, or was there a bit more to that?
I'll throw another one in there just to sort of bring it full circle, in just the fact that obviously I don't watch as much EU NA as I used to. Like, it used to be all that I watched, especially when I was an active player. But what do you think about maybe, you see Tyloo and Renegades, they've been dominant and they've won pretty much every tournament domestically. What do you think about throwing them into the mix of one of these EU tournaments and things like that, as one of the teams that gets to play throughout the bracket or through a group stage or a round robin or whatever, over one of the other like European teams towards the bottom end of things? It's sort of like what do you think about the debate between like, a European team should be in there as opposed to like global representation of bringing, Asian teams and Oceanic teams and things like that, that even if they might not perform as well, if they're dominant in their region, do you think that that's worthy of giving them a spot?
I think context is very important here. To follow up on what Bleh said before, the fact that it's the players that are to blame, it doesn't seem like the same sort of passion or kind of commitment is there from what we've seen from years gone by. If we're not going to see a team that's really above and beyond everyone else in their region, it's difficult to justify right now because the level of play in Europe is so high. Like, everyone within the top 40 within Europe right now is like playing at a super high level, whether you want to take them to a fact it's online or not. Regardless, the results are very close, and to say like one of those teams don't deserve the spot up there would be very difficult to say. Now, if we had someone like a Tyloo that was really dominating and like there was no issues whatsoever, then sure. I feel like if there was a situation where we thought they could get an invite.
We may have lost Henry. I don't know if he can still hear us. I assume you guys can't hear him either.
Yeah. I think we lost him.
Ready? Hello?
Hello,
yeah,
we're back.
He's back.
Oh, that didn't look good. That looks like a big lag spike.
Yeah, you were on a big lag spike. You pretty much cut out for 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay.
So,
Okay. I'm in Malta, and we get like internet drops like once an hour. So I was getting somewhere with that. Where did it get up to before it fucked up?
I think you were on the point about if there was a team like Tyloo at the top, really dominating everything, maybe then they deserve it. But
sure.
If not, then it's hard to justify.
That's pretty much it. I don't think we shouldn't shoe in someone just for the sake of like, oh, they're the best of what we have right now. If there was a team that made a really compelling case that we thought, okay, they deserve a spot and there's one up for debate, then absolutely. I think it's not as easy to say though, oh, every time this tournament runs, we're going to give a slot to the Asian teams. I just don't think that's justifiable right now. But in the future, if the more than 4 teams start stepping up, I feel like that there should be a conversation for that, for sure.
And do you feel like there's like a difference between when they come over and play internationally? Like, you look at a team like Renegades, they go and play a DreamHack event and they actually make it to the grand final. Whereas like at the old Tyloo mixed team, when they came over and played Pro League, didn't really have any results. Do you think that when teams do get those international opportunities and actually get a few wins and a few upsets, that gives them a much better sort of clout to get more invites and things like that?
Yeah, it has to be one of those runs that has something to it, doesn't it? It can't just be takes a map or two, or that there has to be like a best of 3 win. There has to be something significant that, even if it's not a deep tournament run, just knocking out a team they weren't expecting to, something like that. You know, like I remember when like it was, I can't remember which tournament it was. I've done so many, but I remember when Tyloo turned up in the first round. I think it was Katowice. They took down MIBR in like a best of 1, something like that. It was like one of those sort of games. It's just like it didn't knock on tremendously well in terms of like the tournament. It didn't really have a massive knock-on effect there, but it was a big result in terms of they won a series against MIBR to kick things off. And that's when people started to pay attention, right? So it's really difficult to quantify what they would have to do to keep us interested. But I think just a notorious result where they take a series or knock out a big team, just you need one of those results basically. You don't need to come in the top 4. You just need to show you can play competitive CS and actually have some character to knock out someone a bigger name than someone expects and something like that. You have to make a dent essentially.
Yeah, I think it's a situation like what we saw from Greyhound maybe at the likes of IEM Sydney, where they were able to knock MIBR out, or have a deep run against Fnatic in the lower bracket, that sort of thing. Those kinds of results, and short of Renegades, and I mean, I guess we can't really say Tyloo or Vici right now because we haven't seen them in their current iterations play internationally. There isn't really any teams that seem to be doing that. Although I do have a feeling maybe Tyloo might be able to. We've spoken extensively about that topic as well with this new 5-man Chinese roster, no more communication issues. At least that's not an excuse anymore. Anyways, we'll move on from that topic and move into another one that's still sort of a bit more centered around the Asian region. We mentioned Bntet a little bit earlier, Bleh, and the question this time is, has Bntet done enough as an individual to sort of bring attention to the region? Do people even look to Bntet as that sort of mascot for the Asian region? Is that something you even consider, right? Because you're in the talent scout game right now. So do you look at Bntet and go, oh, he's pretty good. Maybe there's someone else behind that in the region, or are you just looking straight at the region and going, fuck that?
There's so much to look into this in terms of like language barriers and cultural differences in terms of having to bring a player over to Europe. Like we don't have facilities in Europe, especially, but just talking about Cloud9, right? We would have to bring them over into their own apartment. They'd have to kind of live on by their own means and stuff. So it's very difficult to justify bringing over someone who isn't used to, let alone living in like an English-speaking country. It could be like Denmark or something like that. It could just be a European one. It could be very difficult. I'll be honest with you. We had a serious discussion whether we should actually approach Bntet. We think he's great. Like we wanted to see whether he would be available to fill one of our rifle roles, but we kind of thought against it for those reasons as well. Like project, the North America setting up, got to have the facility resources within Europe to help him out.
You're starting to struggle a little bit again.
Yeah,
I might have to start again from the Bntet bit.
That's okay. That's okay. So we are actually considering Bntet. We didn't have any chats or anything with him, but we were definitely, there was a good hour conversation we had as to whether we thought he would be viable to pick up. But being Cloud9 based in North America, we're going to be setting up shop in Europe. It doesn't seem viable for me to bring players over that are going to need a lot more support than your everyday kind of European-based player. Like I'm already taking the risk with one of my players coming over. I guess it hasn't been announced yet, so we'll just leave it at that. And we've got to have him based within Europe. So I can't have too many kind of difficult transitions in terms of bringing a player over. I feel like Bntet, he's happy where he is in terms of a visa situation, in terms of cultural differences, and then making them feel comfortable where we'd be set up. I just don't think me getting another Asian player now would be too much of a gamble, unless they were like a little bit more notorious in terms of like they had some brand power. They had a big personality. They had a YouTube channel. I could see like they're comfortable speaking English and they understand how to base themselves within Europe, and that wouldn't be a problem. I just don't know how to even start that conversation because these players, like it seems like even when they come to the tournaments, we don't get to really hang out with them. They come and play, and that's all I really know about them. I know their in-game personas. I've never met them outside, so it's very difficult for me to gauge who would even be a viable pickup. Like who could even speak English on a level where we could trust them to be within a team that's English speaking. There's so many different facets to this whole question.
Yeah, definitely. And it sort of leads into the next one, which I feel like you've kind of already answered here. Was a specific question from one of our, one of the players actually in the region. He wondered whether or not you had considered anyone from the Asian region, and the answer seems to be no for the aforementioned reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's always going to be talent in terms of the skill and potential. It's always going to be there. But for reasons I've already mentioned, the primary reason right now is the fact that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Australia and Asia in general have locked down flights for us, and we're building a team for next month, right?
Yeah.
So for me to even consider that, it's impossible. Just right now, just from a logistical standpoint, if that wasn't the barrier, I would still probably find myself in the point where there's no one exceptional enough. There's not like you've got like a simple level player over here that's like, okay, his stats speak for themselves. That there's enough there for everyone to go, right, he's the one. Let's give him a chance. We're desperate. We'll take a punt on him. And I'm sure there'll be the organizations that if there was that sort of player available, they'd maybe give it a punt. I think just Bntet was your last export like that. We haven't had anyone since. Unless I'm wrong, maybe there's someone else that is kind of knocking on the door of that level. I haven't heard of them.
Well, we've had that exact conversation on this show a couple of times. We get viewer questions every now and then where people are asking who's going to be the next Bntet? Can there be another Bntet? And we've sort of thrown a few names around. We did that more or less in that little skit last episode where we were trying to pitch players to HenryB. We spoke about some of those guys like Urcast. I'm sure, you've heard of Urcast. He's been around a little bit. But I even look at him and I look at his numbers and I don't see him hitting that same level as what Bntet was able to do when Bntet was playing in Asia. Xign is another one. Kaze is another one. But again, they are very good within the Asia region, but largely untested internationally. I think the exception there maybe is Kaze, who did have a pretty good stint back in the day. I think at the E-League major, he played really well.
No, it was Katowice.
Katowice? Yeah, there was one major.
Yeah.
They're not that good as well, I remember.
Yeah, and the problem with all of those players as well is that obviously, when you're looking to build a roster at a specific point in time, every player that we're pitching, we're thinking of like, oh, they had their breakout event at this time. The thing is, like, just going back to the time period of hype around Asian CS as a region, I'm thinking of fucking Kaze, like, oh shit, like 3 years ago, he went international, was actually doing something like noteworthy, or these other players where it's like, oh, it was in 2018 or something. Like, I'm sort of nostalgically thinking of a really good period of form for some of these players. Even Bntet, I would say, like in that later iteration of Tyloo, sort of lost a lot of his bite, going from like a 1.3 rated player or something like that, started playing more supportively. So yeah, I don't think there is, even Bntet, I would argue, isn't like necessarily some kind of crazy outstanding player at the moment, within his role in Gen G, and that kind of, it made me realize that a little bit when we did a bit of the NA Pro League, I think it was, and we were interviewing and we were asking some of the NA players what they thought about Bntet, and they were like, oh, he's all right, but we're not scared of him or anything. Like, he's just another player. We're going to beat him. And then they went on and they did it. So
yeah, I mean, I think we hold Bntet on a higher pedestal than maybe some of the international viewers might, just because of the domination that he had within the Asian region. Now, I know Henry's lagging out at the moment. He's just popping a mad vape at the moment. It's like it's the perfect freeze frame. So that might even be one that we use for the thumbnail. Hopefully, he'll be back soon.
I think you vaped your internet out, mate.
Yeah, I think I did. The clouds are too fat. What was happening there?
We had a fucking sick freeze frame of you just...
Yeah, I saw it. That was the last thing I saw. It's like, that's not going to go down. I look like Elon Musk on Joe Rogan.
You're not blowing the water vapor on your router, are you?
Apparently I am, yeah. Could
all
be.
Right. Anyway, I don't know how much you heard of that, but
I heard it all. It was just me that wasn't coming through. I heard everything you guys were saying. That's cool. Good.
All right, well, I'll remember that next time you lag out. I'll just keep going and we'll ask the next question and then wait for you to come back. What was my next question? Oh, I can remember. Okay. So on this whole topic of sending players or exporting players from the Asia region, I'm sure you would have, been quite interested to hear at one point that Smooya and Snappy might be having a bit of a journey to the Asian region to play for Tiger. So is that a world where you think like maybe some players would be interested in doing that? Obviously not right now during COVID times, but in normal times, be something that could happen?
Yeah, we've seen kind of glimmers of it, haven't we? We kind of had a joke about it earlier with Bondic and stuff. Like, there's been some players over there. I think it would be similar to other sports. I feel like if the money is here, and I know that some organizations do have the cash and they want to bring over some established names that aren't necessarily at the peak of their careers individually or mechanically, but they have a lot of experience to bring over and kind of blueprints and how to build the team. And an Asian team was happy to work with them in terms of language barriers as well. I think that's mainly the biggest issue with this whole idea. But I feel like it would have to be a money situation as long as the finances are there and it made sense for someone to move continent like that. I don't see why not. I don't think that'll be a move that we see for maybe the next 3 years, given everything that's going on right now. But yeah, in the future, I feel like there's definitely possibilities of that. Just like football, when a player kind of reaches his peak and he's done everything he can in terms of like maybe the Premier League or something like that, wants to kind of just tone things down in terms of the pressure and scheduling, but he wants to still be competitive and contribute to a new project, that could be certainly an option. I don't think you'll see anyone at the peak of their career doing that for sure, but hopefully you'll see some bigger names go over there. Like Get Right could be the perfect X4, for example. That would be a great name to go over, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm sure they've got a lot of fans in China. You know, I know the Chinese fans love the NIP squad, but yeah, I think people internationally maybe don't really realize how much money there is in the Chinese scene. Like, they've got 50K tournaments every couple of weeks, all the time. And they don't get much coverage on HLTV because of, you know, all the drama back in the day. HLTV just took them off and said, fuck that. But those tournaments are still going. That money is still there. And those players, like particularly the likes of Tyloo and Vici, are making a pretty good living. I don't know what their salaries are. And I'm sure they're not anything near what the global salaries are. But I don't think it'd be a bad living if you like Chinese food.
It's not, from what I know, I'm not going to like really bring out the numbers, but it's nowhere close to what a top 15 team would be getting paid right now. But if you're living in China, if you're living like in Asia, that's still a lot of money for an Asian player. But again, like, if you're going to be getting a player coming in from EU, maybe from NA, I'm assuming they're going to be paying them way more money than they would really be earning if they were a Chinese or an Asian national, right? So I think it's viable. I think Henry kind of like just hits nail right on the head there. Like, unless you're like a player who is at a peak or very young and looking to be, you know, to really grow in the scene, be in a top 5 team, you wouldn't be switching over. But if you're kind of like a, you know, an IGL, maybe like a Get Right sort of a player who's kind of like past his prime, it would be ideal. But then it again comes down to the culture. And with the one thing, which this is me speaking to a few players and, you know, personalities in the Chinese scene, it's this mentality when it comes to the Chinese players in general, especially Chinese players, not just about Asians in general. It's about how there is a tendency, there's kind of like a cocky approach to Counter-Strike, you know? It's more like, yeah, I'm just going to out-aim. Simple. That's my mentality coming into a game against Na'Vi. That's how these players play it. It's how they approach it. So even when you had people like Bondic, you had even Jonta, who was coaching for Tyloo at one point. Jonta was breaking his head against a wall because somebody just keeps pushing B on the CT side every single fucking round. And Jonta's like, I can't do this. I can't handle this anymore. And he had to leave. I mean, what more do you want, right? You're getting in players, you're getting in coaches who have coached top 10, top 20 teams in the world, and you're still not listening to them. And I'm talking about teams like a Tyloo. So even if the players do move in, right, even if they do take the gamble and head over to China, maybe try to be a coach, an in-game leader for some of these teams, again, it's going to come down to the players themselves. Are they willing to adapt? Are they willing to change? And also, of course, the language barrier. Yeah.
I sort of thought like, oh, surely, you know, if an international player comes across, they are going to listen to them just because of putting that player on the pedestal. But now you've reminded me of all these situations where that hasn't happened. So, you know, me being naive as usual. But anyway, that's fine. Look, let's move on to a bit more of a global topic. And this is one that, you know, it's a couple of weeks old, but we do only record fortnightly. So we'll catch up with them every now and then. We've got to get the opinions from the whole peanut gallery here. 10 a.m. starts. Now, this was a whole discussion topic, a bit of a clickbaity one, but, you know, we've got to get the clickbait in there. We've got Henry here for the clickbait, so hopefully that gets us some more views. But, you know, the drama as well. So let's go with Pilsky first. You've been a little bit quiet for the meanwhile. So what do you reckon about this whole 10 a.m. discussion? Is it bullshit? You know, because, look, I can understand it from a player's perspective, but I will just say, we woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning for 4-5 weeks straight to cast ESL Pro League, ESL 1 Cologne. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And granted, we are not the name powers that can be demanding midday afternoon starts, but even still, sometimes it just is what it is.
I mean, that whole run literally fucked my life up because, you know, I was still doing full-time uni at the same time. So, like, legit, it was so fucked. Look, to be honest, from my perspective, I think the players are just frustrated and looking for a way of expressing that frustration, really. And I can relate to that in the fact that I've been a 16, 17-year-old or like even 18, 19 trying to be good at CS and getting up for these ODCs on the weekend, like one-day comps or LANs, and they start at like 9 a.m. and you're like living this lifestyle where you're fucking playing late into the night. And you don't feel like you can get up in the morning and actually do your peak performance. And it's frustrating to play a game of CS and especially lose a game of CS or like maybe not play as well against a team that you wanted to when something matters to you. Like forget about prize money or salary or anything like that, just winning the game. Like players are competitive by nature and they care about winning the game. And when you can't put in your performance or you feel like there's a mental block, that's the kind of frustration that gets these responses out of people. And I think that's what it really comes down to at the end of the day. From my perspective, though, like I think, you know, that's where it sort of ends because I relate to that perspective going back to that time when I was a player. But then after that, you know, when I was too shit at CS to actually make anything out of it, had to, you know, go start fucking working in hospitality and then getting up at like way earlier than that to actually do something that's not playing games, which is fucking sick. So there you go. You got to do what you got to do sometimes. But at the same time, I can understand the frustration from some regard, and I'm sure some of you guys can as well, having, you know, dabbled in playing games.
Well, where do you sit on this?
I kind of can identify with the entire, like, I was working a full-time job and I was still playing Counter-Strike a little seriously, right? And I remember how we had games on the weekdays, qualifiers like 2 in the afternoon. I had a fucking job, 9-to-5 job. I had to like take it off, go play the game, come back to my job and all of that. But here's the thing. I get it, like especially teams who are complaining where these are players playing the highest level of Counter-Strike. They use a certain, comfort period, and most games do happen in the afternoon. So I get where they're coming from. At the same time, though, you knew what time the game is going to be starting ahead of time, if I'm not mistaken, at least a week or so. That's what I read on Twitter. And if you're a professional, you plan around it. You might be annoyed about it. You might not be necessarily happy about it. You plan around. You make it work, right? That's kind of a part of your job, I feel like. And if you do have issues with that, take it up with a TO. Take it up with a TO. Talk to them. Do it with a CSPPA or a CSSPPA, right? Talk to them. Talk to your org, your manager. Make them figure shit out. There's no need to be petulant about it publicly, especially, right? It just doesn't come off as a good look, if you ask me, in a lot of aspects. So I get it. I get why they might be a little frustrated. At the same time, you're a professional. You're playing at some of the biggest teams. You're playing as a member of some of the biggest orgs, some of the biggest names on the planet. There's a better way to approach this than what they did.
Okay. I wonder where you sit on this side here, Henry, because you're obviously now looking at it maybe from a bit of a different perspective, being internal within a team.
Sure. Yeah, I kind of echo the sentiments of Blair, I suppose. It's one of those things that, yes, he has a point to an extent where, sure, if they've been playing this time frames or the kind of scheduling they've been doing for the last 6 weeks, and that's what has been told, they have there's an argument to be made that, yeah, it's annoying and it's not ideal and they can't be expected to perform at the same level they usually would. But at the same time, taking that to Twitter certainly isn't the domain for something like this, especially in the kind of venomous way that it was presented to saying, like, I think the quote was, well, fuck 10 a.m. games. It's like, that's not even a constructive tweet, is it? It doesn't even mean anything. It's just showing your disdain for something without offering a solution or giving any sort of context as to why it's bad. It just started a really kind of negative conversation on Twitter. That was one of the most upvoted things on Twitter we've ever had. On Reddit, we've ever had. It was like 14,000 upvotes or something. It was just such a crazy, blown out of proportion, just a silly throwaway tweet that got out of hand. So yeah, definitely shouldn't have tweeted it, but it definitely shouldn't have blown up the way it should. It was just a young man who was frustrated at waking up early and shouldn't have done the tweet, but it's not a massive issue within CS or anything like that.
I think, it sort of goes back to, I was watching Richard's video about this exact topic, and he was sort of saying, look, this whole thing is just being thrown around as a bit of clickbait, as a bit of drama, try and get the impressions, try to get the views. And yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, it's not that big of a deal on either side. Like, I think if I have to wake up at 10 a.m. to cast a game of Counter-Strike, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But
it's one of those things that everyone's learned their lesson now. This is not going to happen again. Yeah. Everyone's done we've seen the tweets now. We've seen what can happen if you do those tweets. That'll be the last of them, and we can all move on with our lives.
We'll see. We'll see.
I reckon Twitter and Reddit is the perfect environment for this kind of thing to happen on the reg, mate.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think the pros, at least, will be that silly to tweet anything that inflammatory again. Like, sure, tweet your opinions, but just articulate them in the way that's constructive and not just angry and emotional. That's all you have to do. Like, sure, you can give your opinion, but if you're going to do it publicly, at least think about it first before you kind of just go, all right, just before you put it out there.
All right, Pilsky, let's move on to one of your questions. You wanted to talk about IEM Sydney a little bit, I believe.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask you what you thought, Henry, about IEM Sydney / Melbourne becoming a mainstay sort of part of the CS calendar, because I remember when the first one happened and I was thinking to myself, man, it would be awesome if this happened again. But I obviously didn't think it would. Like, I don't know how often, you're going to commit to moving like a roadshow all the way down under, or moving it to like a China or something like that. But it seems like it's a thing that's returning year after year. So what do you think about visiting all these different locations, and even things like tournaments going to locations like even South America and things like that more often?
Yeah, I think it's very important, actually. I just feel like it hasn't been approached in the right ways in the past. I feel like Sydney's actually one of the exemptions from what I just said there, because it's actually got a bit of identity with the event itself, right? It feels like it's got its own. The reason we go there is not just because it's a cool arena or anything like that. It's just it's a special event for its own unique reasons, I would say. Like the crowd and the energy that's there speaks for itself. The fact we've got like the cash is going on there as well. There's always like super like deep runs in the Australian team. It seems like they always step up when they have to. Is this something like a bit magical about Sydney and going into Melbourne, I guess? There's something about that event. Everyone looks forward to it because it's very unique, and says we have it once a year. It's the only event you guys really get of that magnitude. So it's always like a lot of fun. Like, obviously for me, like, it's always a highlight of my calendar. I get to be the center of attention in good ways and bad, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it's very important to have these kind of roadshow tournaments. Like, I would say we need less of them. Like, we need less international events, generally speaking, but having like the mainstay tournaments that make sense, I think there's absolutely an argument to be made that Sydney needs to be one of those. And it's important to the Counter-Strike community to keep you guys kind of in the conversation, reminders of who the upcoming teams from that region are, because they always get a crack of it as well. We invite a few more of the teams, and they always do decent damage, like they always seem to like have a pretty decent run and impress us, as we see, like, not necessarily even the teams, but we learn more about the players. There'll be players from the lesser teams that go on a crazy couple of maps against the big dogs. They might not win the map, but we see like some of the talent there. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's very important to keep that going, and hopefully we see a return in the not so distant future.
Yeah, I might be biased, but I definitely agree. From my perspective, and I think the perspective of Australian audiences and everyone involved, and maybe it's not even just Australia, maybe it's all of these sort of minor regions. I think it is very important to have these kinds of global events come to our regions, because it is a bit of a taste of being involved in the global ecosystem for once. Teams like Renegades, they get to go. Teams like Tyloo, they get to go. But for those of us that really just primarily work within the Australian region, play within the Australian region, it is nice to have that kind of exposure to be able to be involved in something like that. And it really is something that kind of continues to drive the scene a little bit. And it's not just the players. That's the main thing that I want to also sort of highlight. It's like teams, organizations, talent, obviously, for us to be involved in IEM Sydney, is something that's kind of a big deal on our calendar. It's one of very few arena shows that we do in Australia. So it's a big stepping stone for any talent. It's something that all of the Australian casters aspire to. So it's a really, really big, important sort of a thing for us. And hopefully, Melbourne comes back next year, which I believe it will be. Don't want to drop any bombs, but I think that's already been sort of announced that the intention is to come back. So hopefully that happens, and hopefully we see Cloud9 there, because we do want to see you back again, obviously.
Oh, yeah, I hope so. Like, I feel like I've got a bit of an ace in my sleeve. Like, if I say to them, potentially I could think about a certain show match. Who knows?
Yeah. How sick would it be if you bring your Cloud9 team and they're playing in the show match, and then you just kick Alex out of his in-game leader spot and leave the boys? That would be fantastic.
Perfect, wouldn't it? I've already got 2 British players available as well. It would all be coming full circle. I'd come back even stronger than I did before. With actual British players, it would be a beautiful thing.
Only to lose overtime or 16-14.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
not to win, of course, but it would be a great game. We'd get right to the finish line before we fell over.
Yeah. Anyway, that was one of our viewer questions actually as well. So Joshaaye, shout outs to you for that. Obviously, Henry's quite keen to come back for Cashes in 2021.
For sure. Yeah.
All right. So the final question from me, and then we do get into the real viewer questions, is surrounding, obviously, you're building a team right now, but it seems like a strange time to be building a team, obviously, with this whole COVID pandemic. But is it actually a good time to be building a team or not?
No, it's actually probably the worst time in history to be building a CSGO team. The price tags couldn't be higher. The contracts couldn't be more secure. The major's been postponed, so it means we're locked into RMR point situation. This probably is the worst time to try and build a team, especially from the ground up. And to be fair, I've done a pretty good job, I don't mind myself saying, because I've been doing this for 1 month and I've managed to sign 4 players. So the fact I've managed to do that and I've accomplished my goals of getting the names I actually set out to get as well, I feel pretty proud of that, to be honest with you, because honestly, like trying to get players out of their contracts now, and some of the agents that are involved, like the agents now representing the pros are the same agents that represent professional football players within Europe as well. So trying to negotiate with them and find a deal that works and find the right amount of money and trying to get those deals over the line is honestly, it's a fucking nightmare. It's so difficult to get the pen to paper, get on both sides. You need to get the players deals sorted. You need to get the transfer agreement sorted. Sorry. And at that point, it's just with the major being moved the most as well, that hurts us so badly. Like just knowing that, for context, anyone who's watching, if you now within the major system as it is, and you have RMR points, if you remove a player from that squad, the team loses 20%, right? So no one is wanting to sell their players right now. That's the main problem. No one wants to leave their rosters as well because they want to play in the major. Everyone wants to, but we don't know what the future of the major is, so no one wants to take the chance of leaving their roster. What if they turn around in a couple of months' time and go, right, we've sorted it out, we found an arena, we're doing it, we're doing the major properly. Who knows what's going to happen there? So no one really wants to move. So to answer your question, it's not a good time, but we've managed to make it work.
Is it also kind of like a little, I don't know, like Valve say that they've kind of canceled a major, but like you said as well, Henry, like if you look at, let's look at a team like Vici, right? We've been talking about them quite a while. They're a team who, we think should make a roster change, and this is something which could apply to a lot of other teams as well who are playing, in the EU RMR events or the NA RMR events. And now because of the uncertainty, there could be a world where they're like, yeah, we want to make a change. We want to take out this player, maybe bring in this potential superstar, but that's going to affect their overall RMR points. And this could be a team, let's say in EU, who, if they lose a 20% points, they're not going to qualify for the major whenever that happens. So a little bit of more clarity from Valve saying, a little bit of a road plan for at least till, let's say, I don't know, like till June, July next year. I think that would be really, really helpful for some of these teams.
I feel like if you're going to do things like, oh, we're going to cancel / postpone this indefinitely, you have to address the RMR issue. Otherwise, Indeed. We're just going to be, no, you're going to slow down and kind of like the transition of so many players' careers and the way we can progress in the game. Like you created this system, it's obviously not worked out for reasons out of everyone's control, but we can't just pause CSGO. We can't just have all these people locked in contracts and teams they don't want to be in and situations that don't make sense just because of this one tournament. And let's be honest, like a lot of these teams waiting to make changes are just going to get dunked in last place anyway. So I don't know what they're waiting for apart from it's the orgs that want the sticker money. That's essentially it. The orgs on the sticker money, and of course there's no revenue streams from CSGO, so you can't blame them. That's what they want, like, and it's good money for the players too, but that's not a good reason. It's not a compelling reason to stay together and slow down the pace of CSGO already in a problematic time. It's just another thing to add to the bill as to why we're kind of fucked right now in CS and how it's kind of the brakes have been put on in quite a dramatic way. This is just another reason as to why things are a bit squiff right now.
Well, speaking of sticker money, that might be one of our viewers' trigger words. We have a question from Sniper, but we'll get to that in a second. I do want to start off with one particularly pertaining to you. Now, we are moving into viewer questions, so these are all from some of the fans and the viewers. Piece. Yeah, hopefully some of them are going to be pretty interesting. I think they've got some good ones in the party mix.
I'm sure they'll be interesting. Yeah. I'm not sure whether they'll be good. We'll find out.
See. So Kaonashi asks, how did Cloud9 approach Henry and did he quit casting because of this? Now, I know you sort of answered this partly in the interview that you did when you obviously announced that you were moving on from casting, but I don't think you specifically spoke about how Cloud9 necessarily approached you, or did you approach them? Like, what was the process there?
I definitely let my peers and colleagues know that I was obviously stepping down from commentary, especially the guys who I thought might be able to help me out. And I mentioned that I was interested in the whole GM role because I don't think anyone's actually done it, to be honest with you. There's certainly been GMs within esports, but no one's really actually done it in the sense of the potential I see it has. I feel like you can be a bit of a twat with it, and you can be over the top, you can be a bit more of a showman and make the team yours in a sense. You can be an asset of the team. You don't just have to be a kind of a faceless character that's kind of working in an office. Like, I feel like there's something to be done there. And I think Cloud9 were on the same page. Like, once they heard what I was planning on doing with the GM role, I'm not sure who told them, to be honest. I think it was Duncan who hooked up the introduction, at least. I let him know what I wanted to do. Thorin, that is. I let him know what I wanted to do. And then he Cloud9 know, or Jack specifically, as to what my plans were going forward, and they just hit me up straight away. They emailed me and said, would I like to have a chat? And I kind of just explained my vision. Like I said, like, I don't have a team for you right now, but I can certainly build you one. I feel like my relationship with the players is quite unique, being a former pro myself, albeit a long time ago, and being involved with the commentary and the tournament for so long. I have very good friendships with pretty much every single player. I feel like they trust me and my judgment, and I could give me a week and I could probably get you some players signed, and I'm pretty confident I could do that. So it was a very quick turnaround. This was like mid-August, and I signed my contract with them on the 25th of August. So yeah, it was a super quick turnaround. They was on the fence time for Cloud9. It was just like, for them, it was like do or die for CSGO. Like, you'll see a lot of orgs kind of switch over to maybe a focus on Valorant now, or sticking with CSGO for obvious reasons, especially if you're a North American org. Their team wasn't doing great, and Cloud9 really does demand the best in terms of their results and where they stand within the placements and standings. And they want a top 10 team, and that's fair enough. Like, the size of the org demands it almost. Like, you'd expect Cloud9 to be absolutely killing it in CSGO, at least knocking on the door of the top 10 week in, week out. That's where that brand should be. And not to say that the previous roster was bad or anything. I'm a fan of theirs. I think they've got some fantastic players within their ranks. It just wasn't working out. They weren't playing at Cloud9 level. They were given 9 months, didn't really work out for them, and that's fair enough. So in terms of Cloud9 coming to me, they realized that I was going to do things a bit differently. I feel like it was worth the investment from their end, in terms of knowing it would be someone that can not only build them a great team, it can bring them some brand power as well. It can bring them some social media interaction. And the way I've kind of marketed things and done it all, I feel like it's spoken for itself in terms of how exciting and kind of dramatic you can make it all. Obviously a little bit over the top, but that's marketing for you. That's what I do. That's what I'm paid to do, is make a splash and get everyone hyped up. And hopefully, I don't know what you guys think, but I think it's been a bit different. It's been a little bit exciting, fun to follow, at least in this tragic time of ours. I try to make something a bit more exciting and fun to watch.
It has been interesting. Yeah. I think we've all been excited to see which Australian or Asian player you're going to announce. You know, so
not even just the marketing aspect of it, but even just like networking and brand power, being able to like retool what you do into a completely different role and find opportunities that you might not have even considered are there. Like, some people don't consider how big of a role, networking and building your brand and reputation have, but it's insane how you've been able to turn it around into that.
Yeah, I feel like people, especially players, I think this will be a good PSA to them. Like, you got to make sure that if your main income ever does go wrong, you need to be building up your channels and your brand and making sure that that's always going strong as well, because like you saw what happened to me, like out of nowhere, shit can hit the fan very quickly, and you need to have backups. You need to be working on your kind of what happens if your contingency plans if things do go wrong. And I always just made sure that I kept in good faith with everyone. I was always working on making sure my socials were popping. I always made sure I was an interesting character, and I wanted to make sure like I would have some staying power if anything ever did go wrong. And hopefully that did transition over quite well. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that. That was my intention this entire time, making sure there was always a backup plan, and I had something to offer if the commentary didn't work out.
Yeah. So am I right in saying that you wouldn't have quit commentary if there wasn't like an alternate option? Or like, would you have stuck with it for the foreseeable future, at least?
I would have probably seen out the year. Like, I had the option to go back to Pro League this year, but it would have been like after all the, let's call it controversy. I don't really want to get into that, to be honest with you. The controversy that went down, it was just a good opportunity. It seemed a good time of any, considering I was already on the fence about the whole thing. It just felt like it was a good opportunity to explore my options. I think I was assessing my market value at that time to see, like, okay, if I did want to step away from commentary, could I justify it? Could I find some sort of income that would be on the same level as my commentary? Could I find a lifestyle that would potentially make me happier? Because I'm sure you all read and you can all relate to, actually, that the fact that the commentary schedule and the lifestyle, sure, it looks great from the outside. You get to talk about games all the time, but it's quite hollow and quite demanding and can destroy every other facet of your life. Like you mentioned, Pilsky, like your university situation and stuff like that. We all have lives to deal with and not necessarily enough time to live them with this job. And that's a big problem. And I think for me, assessing what was the plus sides of commentary, like what was making me happy, and it was getting, that list was just getting smaller and smaller as time went on. Like I was kind of ticking things off as to what things were making me happy with commentary. I was just getting down to just the point of, well, it pays really well. That was pretty much the last factor for me, especially when we got to like the studio only broadcast, online games only. I just done 60 days straight in Germany as well. Like I couldn't be more jaded with the whole thing. And then knowing I was, like I said, I was asked to come back to Pro League, it'd be the same situation again. I just didn't have it in me. And my heart bleeds to anyone who's doing those schedules right now, just day in, day out, and having to commentate that much Counter-Strike. It sucks the life out of you. And it's just not a fun time. So not to boast or anything, but it's like I feel much happier myself now. Like I'm not commentating all those games. I feel good being off camera. I feel like after 7 years of doing that pretty much every day of my life, I actually feel like myself again. It actually feels weird to say that. This is the first time in a long time I feel like I'm Henry again. I don't feel like I'm HenryG with a mask on.
Because everyone obviously associates you with being the commentator, so...
Well, yeah. Sometimes when you have like a bit more autonomy and like an outlet for creativity, it's like a big motivator, you know, do something different and it can turn things around for you.
All right. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, on a similar topic, in a similar vein to discussing you going to Cloud9 and that kind of thing, we had a question from Ironhides, and he was basically talking about how you've, been talking a big game. You've been quite a, I would say, show pony when it comes to this whole situation. Yeah. And he asks, would be curious if there's been any moments where Henry has doubted himself. So as in to say, there's going to be a lot of criticism if this roster doesn't perform well immediately, since you obviously have said you've expected results quite quickly. So have you ever doubted yourself? Obviously it's only been, what, a month or six weeks or something like that. Has there ever been a moment where you've just gone, oh shit, maybe I'm in over my head?
No. It's because it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like, I will do everything I possibly can to make this team work, and I'm very confident in my ability and the team I've built to deliver results. If it doesn't work out, I'm not going to be losing any sleep over it. Like, all we'll be doing is working day in, day out. I'm dedicating 100% of my time and passion to this. I have no other distractions in my life right now. It's just focusing on the squad and making sure that everything comes together. In terms of doubts, like there's a lot of things out of my control. All I can do is provide the best possible platform for the team, the resources required to win, and hopefully give them my experience and knowledge and kind of presence as well, just to kind of hopefully that will be enough to kind of give them an extra boost. I don't really know. In terms of the tournaments we've got coming up, we've got Flashpoints, and I'll say this much: I think it's a shame that we might not see the boys on Landers and Lands will be coming back anytime soon, to be honest with you. But who knows? It's going to be one of those things. Like, if we don't win Flashpoint, sure, I'll be gutted with it, but it's not like I'm going to be distraught or devastated or anything like that. It's just going to be, okay, what went wrong, move on, and retool. So sure, there's always going to be moments of doubt. Like, obviously a lot of it's bravado online. It's just about being a bit of a showman and creating some hype. But I do truly believe what we're doing is being done the right way, and I wouldn't be doing it unless I actually believed it. So I know I talk a big game, and I'm certainly a show pony. I think that's a very polite way of putting it. But that's just who I am. I don't do things by half measures, and I wouldn't be putting my name and reputation on the line if I didn't believe in it. So believe in that.
Do you feel like joining up with Cloud9, it kind of gelled together? And do you feel like the approach you had in building this team would not necessarily have clicked with, let's say, some other NA org, right? You obviously know the inner workings of some of these other orgs out there, apart from the Cloud9s, right? And do you think it would just kind of fit for you working with Jack in this Cloud9 experiment, and it maybe wouldn't have worked with someone else?
Definitely. That like I will not do any name drops or anything like that, but I interviewed for a few different orgs, and I need to be given a certain amount of slack, I would say, in terms of you've seen the way I operate, and the statements I put out there, they're not exactly professional or traditional by any sense, and the way that I've been doing things in terms of the transparency and announcing the contracts and the values of those. There's probably 90% of the orgs, to be honest, you wouldn't be up for anything what I'm doing right now. It's probably terrifying for a lot of them to see that even them not being involved in what I'm doing, the fact that I'm releasing this sort of information probably scares them, to be honest. So yeah, like Jack is probably one of the few owners that I could actually work with. I have been very clear from the get-go of this sort of situation that I need full control. If this is going to be a GM project for me, that it is what it is. Like that, I will have full control of the CS:GO squad. Like at the end of the day, every decision will come down to me. Jack certainly has the final say at the budgets and how much money I can spend, but that's about what the kind of transition of power ends. Like every other decision's under my remits, and that is not necessarily the case with a lot of GMs in esports. Like I think it's still a bit of a dark art what that role even is. Like you could call someone a GM and give them as little or as much responsibility as you like and still call them a GM because it's a general manager, right? You can just say, oh yeah, he just looks after everything in the CS:GO squad. Like anyone who's just maybe a manager could be called a GM. But just to be clear, the GM has total control over the budgets, the transfers, the practice schedule, the kind of the benching situation. It's like you've got the coach who will work with the GM, but it's the kind of, that's the top of the food chain. I have a manager that works beneath me as well, and it's just one of those things where to work with any other org, they would have to put up with the fact where they wouldn't be able to have full control of my social media or my statements or my decisions. And Cloud9 have been very, very cool in that sense. So they said, right, as long as you're responsible for everything you're doing and you understand that this comes with a cost, if it goes wrong, if it backfires, that will also be on you as well. That's absolutely fine. And I feel like I accept that responsibility. I don't do anything too untoward or too crazy that jeopardizes the reputation of the org or anything. It's just very different to what everyone else does.
Something fresh, something different, which is always
exactly
exciting.
But I had to. Well, what did everyone expect? So you feel I was going to come in and just do everything normally and quietly? Like, hell no. Like, this is
obscurity.
No, that's not going to be my style, is it? So I think they knew what they're getting themselves into. If you sign HenryG up to do a job like this, you get what you expect.
All right, well, back onto a bit more of a Counter-Strike related topic, or at least the game itself. Snyper, one of our good mates and one of our friends who really loves his stickers in-game, wants to know which countries or teams' brand of CS is your favorite to watch. And maybe this is a question that we can sort of answer across the board just to keep Bleh and Pilsky in the discussion as well.
Oh, I tell you what, I love a bit of Russian Counter-Strike every now and then. The CIS region, like watching some of the absolute nuts skill and aggression sometimes in some of those teams, their CT side aggression, I think can be super exciting. Like, I'm a big Shuro fan. I don't know about you guys. Like, I think that guy's absolutely fucking sick. Like, I love watching him. I think he's so cool to watch. I actually messaged him. I messaged him. I said, like, mate, any chance you're interested in coming over to EU team? No response. That's how much that guy's balling right now. He's not even interested.
Doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, he said no. He didn't even give me the blue ticks. Nothing. Just not even a reply. Nothing at all. So when we have the first couple of days of building the team, I thought, fuck it, I'll give it a go. I'll give him a little pump. But yeah, for me, I think the CIS region, I think they're like, in terms of skill within that region, everyone underestimates them still to this day. Like even back in the day, like you look back in like my era of 1.6 and Source, at the Russian and like at the Kazakh teams and stuff like that, they're nuts players there. And I think we're starting to see that now, especially in the kind of online era where everyone's getting a bit of a boost, I guess, overall. Like you're seeing so many like crazy players step out there. So that's my entry. I would go with CIS, specifically Russia. Let's go with that.
All right, Bleh, your turn then.
I want to say Danish Counter-Strike because of how starved Asian CS has been when it comes to leadership and like a proper structure to grow the players. But off late, I'm going to say Furia. Not Brazilian Counter-Strike as a whole right now, but Furia as a team. Because I feel like they are what a Tyloo could have been once upon a time if they had gone down that route. It's aggression, but it's tempered, controlled, smart aggression and just catching people off guard, innovating, just being different, right? It's such a different, flamboyant style of Counter-Strike, which I genuinely love watching. Don't get me wrong. I love the heroics. I love Astralis. I like that sort of textbook Counter-Strike as well. But this is kind of like a breath of fresh air. And kind of for me, it kind of lays down that the fact there is no right way to play Counter-Strike. There's no like one golden chalice when it comes to, oh, this is the golden chalice of Counter-Strike. You got to play it this way to be the best team in the world. And I feel like someone like Furia, this kind of like dark horse curveball just being thrown in just makes things so interesting. So yeah, has to be the Brazilians. And a close second would be, of course, the entire Danish scene.
Yeah, Blair's just stole my answers, so there is that. But I'll add one more into the mix, which is probably something that most of the viewers of this podcast can relate to, and that's just whenever you watch a Australian team or even an Asian team go overseas and play in one of these tournaments, you know, just the feeling when you see them. Usually, it's only for about 10 rounds before they get absolutely fucking fisted, but those 10 rounds are fucking euphoria, man. When you see them actually playing well, or you see like old mate that you've been watching for like 6 to 8 months grinding it out in Oz, like dropping 30s, and he has like a 4K in one round, you're like, oh fuck.
Hey, don't remind me of having to cast Renegades losing to Mouse Sports at IEM Sydney. Oh no. It was just, I was like, this is my moment, you know. I'm an Aussie caster casting the Aussie team. They're going to make a win happen in the arena in Australia, and then they lost, and I was like, fuck. Like, it was still a great series, you know, and it was one of my best memories from Counter-Strike, or probably is the best memory I've had in Counter-Strike, but, oh, you know, like, what that could have been will always remain in my head, and I'm sure for those guys it might as well. Anyway, that's a bit of fun. I would have probably said Furia as well, but I don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse, so I'll just go and say I like watching Vici when they are playing well, which is...
Yeah, absolute fucking madman. All right.
Yeah, few and far between. Anyway, so let's move on to the next question, which is also from Sniper. He had two, and it's also very in line with the question we had from Will Hume, who's one of my Patreons. Patreon.com/Elfishguy. Hit it up. He wants to know...
Patreon? Really?
Yeah, I got a Patreon. I mean, you've been missing a lot of episodes, Blair.
Holy shit.
We have a lot of feet pics, dude.
4 Patreons. So if you guys are donating on Patreon, we might buy Blair a beer and Pilski.
You moved away from the OnlyFans platform then?
That's right, yeah. The toe pics, they weren't selling too well. So,
fair play, mate. Yeah. So, yeah, Patreon's better. That's fair enough.
Exactly. Anyways, so these guys want to know that now that you are in the Talent Scout game, what advice you would have for the next generation to break through. And Will's question was a little bit more around Mezii, obviously where you sort of found him. But more so, I think it's two sort of different questions that kind of correlate.
I think having a good attitude is like, it sounds a little bit cheesy and cliche, but for me, working with new talents, like there's so many good players out there. There's so many fantastic Counter-Strike players out there. There's so many more than there used to be. Like you'd be so surprised, even breaking out of pro play, like how much like raw mechanical talent there is and players that really understand Counter-Strike and how to play it. It really just comes down to attitude for me at the end of the day. When I speak to a player, I can tell pretty quickly whether I want to work with them or not. Just to talk on Mezii, for example, that's a player probably a lot of people haven't heard of. But coming into this, like he being part of the UK scene, I'd heard of his talents for a while, but there's loads of good UK players. There's plenty of like British players that have the same skill level as some of the tier 2 pros, for example, like that. The skill's never been the issue. It's when I got to speak to him and I realized that he's actually really mature, super calm, very hardworking, and he's humble as well. That's when I realized, okay, there could be something here. He hasn't been tainted by another team. He hasn't taken the egos of others around him and kind of had osmosis kind of take an effect in that regard. But it feels like he is super willing to prove himself. He has had a taste of pro level play with Gamer Legion. Like he kind of got to see how it's done at a kind of lower level, but now he's obviously going to be escalated up, and I feel like he can handle it. Like I spoke to him for a long time about the pressures going forward and how it's going to affect his mindset, but having a good mental attitude and not coming in all cocky and saying, oh, I can do it. Just knowing that you've got to work hard and you're going to be in a particular role or a particular seat for a while, and making sure that you do shine in other facets of it as well. Like Mezii is a player that knows every single smoke and flash in the game, right? Like that's quite it might seem like a ridiculous thing to say, but trust me, there's a lot of young players out there that don't focus on that aspect of the game, and they don't realize how valuable that is. A lot of them just are very flashy, turning up with their entry potential, their snappy aim. They think that's enough. You need to have the players that are putting the time in on the deathmatch, on the kind of offline servers, making sure their theory side is down as well. And I think that's the main thing. To answer your question, it would just be a good mental attitude and making sure that you're the right energy and someone like me would want to work with. Like, sure, you might have all the accolades on the server, but everything outside of that as well, I think is very important. I think that's what Mezii's going to bring. And honestly, I think I might be blowing my own trumpet here. He'll be the best signing I made. Like, watch out next year. Like, that guy will be dropping absolute bombs. Like, he's a beast, and he's got a very, very good mindset as well. I think he's going to be a fantastic pickup for us.
All right, looking forward to it. You did mention branding a little bit earlier as well when we were sort of talking about the Asian players and potentially whether or not they would have moved to Cloud9 or anything like that. So is that a sort of minor factor in any way, shape, or form?
I always have to consider it. When I pick a player up, it's like, obviously, we want to lift trophies. That's number one goal. That's the only reason I'm kind of doing this, is to bring the Cloud9 dynasty back to life, make sure they actually have a top 10 team again. But obviously, we have sponsors. We have players. We need players that can sell products, who can represent themselves, the team, in a positive way, can be part of interviews, and can actually have an on-camera presence. And that is important. Like, if you can't speak English and you expect to play in these sort of teams, you're only confident doing Counter-Strike, that can be fine. It can get you a contract at least. But if you want to be a star of the game, if you want to establish yourself as something bigger than that, I feel like you have to work a bit harder. I guess, like, let's look at some examples, right? Let's look at Zywu. He is someone who doesn't like to do any interviews. He barely likes to go on camera. You barely see him outside doing anything. I assume he streams every now and then. I don't know. But he's considered the number one player in the world next to Simple, like it's whoever you talk to. But as of 2019, he was the number one player in the world, right? And he's got like half the followers I do. And that's kind of crazy to think, right? That he hasn't branded himself, but I assure you he's making much more money than I am. But it's one of those things where he could do so much more with his brand if he wanted to, but he doesn't have to because he's Zywu. Not everyone else is Zywu, for example. A lot of 99.9% of players out there are not Zywu, and they can't get away with that. And I feel like having brand power and having something to offer in terms of being good in interviews or being able to be happily plug sponsorships or have a good social media following, have a YouTube channel, have something to offer, have a good Twitch base, something like that. That's important. I would say it's not a requirement, obviously, for the example I just gave you, but it certainly helps if you're a player looking to develop their career.
Most definitely. All right. Here's a bit of a curveball, and I'm not sure how you're going to go about answering this one, but
all right, go for it.
This one is from Rugbyflanker666, so great username, love that one.
Yeah.
Who wants to know, if Henry were a GM of an Asian CS team, how would he go about creating a top 20 team?
Well, I'm assuming some of these Asian organizations have got the money. They've got the cash.
They've got the money.
Oh yeah, they have the fucking money.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'd be doing is I'd be taking probably 3 stars from the Asian region, the most capable hands, and then I'm bringing over 2, not like done names, but names that are kind of like, I'm bringing an Olofmeister over. That's what I'm doing. I'm bringing an Olofmeister into the mix, and I'm bringing over someone of that caliber as well. Let's say maybe, I don't know, a Jacob, something like that. Those kind of names that are kind of like working out the next move in their career. I'm bringing the hottest 3 players in the Asian region right now that can speak the language, are willing to learn from some absolute legends of players that are still very capable of performing at the top level. But the first names that came to my head. That's what I'd be doing. I'd try to make a mixture so we actually get some attention coming in from the Western region. We actually have some names. We get some viewership. We get some fan base coming in. Tournaments might take us seriously outside of Asia as well, because we've got these big established names from Europe, and it'll be an exciting project. And obviously that's the way I do it. I would get attention, and that's what for me it's all about, is making sure that the team makes a splash and we get invited for the right reasons, and obviously for some different reasons as well, because I like to be a showman. But that's how I do it. I make sure we have 2 big European names surrounded by the best Asia has to offer.
Yeah, I think that was very much the approach that Tiger was trying to go for, don't you reckon, guys? Like, that seemed to be like, let's bring Smooya, let's bring Snappy, let's be the undisputed number 1 team in Asia, and like, honestly, fuck everyone, and then see what happens.
I kind of regret Tiger winning that hour mark, because that's what happened. I know, right? They won the road to Rio, and they're like, oh, guys, we're going to lose points if we make changes, and they didn't make any changes, and then they started slipping further and further down. I felt, even as a fun experiment, like even if they'd just been the Kings of Asia for a couple of months, and listen, you have Snappy there, you have someone like Smooya with his op, you have Urcast, proven entity, you have Dobu, throw in a Cabal over there, right? The guys playing in Tiger. That team easily could have been top 2, maybe a potential top 1 team, especially with Snappy in game leading. And just the success they had could have, again, it's a big could have, but could have led to trickle-down effect where maybe some of the Chinese teams like, that worked out for them. Maybe why don't we get one of these guys? Why don't we get an Olaf or whoever, right? And I feel like one of the biggest missed, I wouldn't say opportunities per se, but like alternate realities, which would have made things way more interesting. But then, of course, COVID happened. So yeah, fuck that.
Okay. Yeah, true. I mean, I agree. I would have liked to have seen it happen. We sort of talked about that back when that all sort of came out. Bit unfortunate how it turned out, but, you know, maybe in the future we'll see something like that happen. All right, then on to the next question, which is from Tham, who is, you know, in and around the Aussie scene. So shout outs to Tham. Yeah. If you were able to create a roster with any player in the world, what would that roster be? Now, I feel like you're already doing that, you know, so maybe we should put the caveat that you can't use any of the Cloud9 players. Aside from Cloud9, who would be on your roster, your dream team?
Let's have a think about it. I would have JKS kick things off. Let's do that. Straight in.
Hang on, wait a second. What you're telling me is JKS isn't on Cloud9 with that. That's the implied...
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet, unfortunately. No,
he's tricked him, boys.
No, it's a good one. It's a good catch. He's not. I can confirm. JKS not on the team. I would love him to be, but he's not. So yeah, JKS for sure to kick things off. Who else do we bring in next? We need something. I need a young gun. I need an experienced pair of hat. Actually, you know what? In terms of kind of new players I've been watching recently, have you seen Deecha from Sprout? I think he's been looking shithole right now. I think he's looked really great. I think I would have him kind of bit of a punt as my entry, so that's aggressive role. Moving on to Sniper, I can't have Woxic. I think he's kind of killing it right now. Obviously, I've got him. Who would we get for the Sniper role? Who would we bring in that's going to be lighting up? I'd probably go for Sturk there, to be honest with you. I love his play style, very similar to Woxic as well. I think he, pound for pound, one of the best in the world right now in terms of his movement, his impact, explosive nature. His consistency right now is great. Then we're moving to an in-game leader situation. Here we go. It's got to be Glaive there, right? I would say it's just got to be Glaive. The all-round package, what he brings, good presence, nice all-rounder, very strong on the server, big LAN player as well. And then what have I got? One more here. Kind of a support rifle, Sticko, you know, kind of anchor things down. Kind of round things off. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's great. I think in that sort of role, that anchor / support role, I think he's fantastic, although he's kind of rebranded himself a bit more. That's why I've always seen Sticko, to be honest with you, and I think he does that role the best in the world. So I think is that 5 now? Have I done the whole squad?
I think so.
Is that enough?
But let's throw in a coach as well, just for argument's sake.
It's interesting how like as simple as I wouldn't even show up there.
Yeah, that's true, of course. But like for me, it's like I don't look at the teams for that. Like, oh, what's the biggest name we can bring in right now? I try and build teams by the roles and what makes sense. And like, of course, you could have everyone's team would have simple and Xywin if they could, you know. But in terms of building a team that's going to, I don't know, make sense and kind of, do you know, like if you ever played FIFA Ultimate Tournament, they kind of when you build them up and they've like got the lines that show that like the synergy and like where they're from and stuff. That's how I kind of look at it when I'm building my team. And it's like, right, what makes sense here? What teams have they played with? Who's Kassad worked with before? Who can vouch for this guy? That's how I look at it when I'm building the team. So I try and be realistic as well. But yeah, obviously like Simple and Zywi you'd have in there if you explosive there. But I just chose my favorite players right now, I guess.
And as far as a coach is concerned, what, Zonic?
Oh, I don't know, actually. Let's have a think about this. Coaches. Who do I think is... I would go with Threat. I think Threat is my favorite coach. I think in terms of what he brings, like I've had a lot of his voice comms and the TS's stuff they released, and I've known him for a very long time. He sees the game in a very similar way to I do. So I'd go with Threat. I think he's a great calming presence and never really had any massive controversy around him. Always seems to be getting the boys in a good position, doing the best of what he has to work with. I would go with Threat as my coach.
Okay, interesting. Nice. Yeah. You guys, were you going to say anything there, Bleh? Because it seemed like you wanted to go on a bit of a tangent, or are you good?
No. I was thinking about the coaching thing, and I was thinking of like someone, especially with some of the more younger players over there, like having someone like Threat would really help. I would even go with someone like Zeus, for example. I feel like it'd be a great fit. But yeah, I mean, you have so many good options out there, so yeah.
Okay.
Everything can go wrong.
Probably a quick one then here from Conky. What is your most favorable, memorable event from casting?
There's a lot of them for different reasons as well. So let's think about it. I guess in terms of the most memorable one would be PGL Krakow, like kind of quarterfinals when we had VP in the arena. It was just nuts. Yeah, the atmosphere. It was insane. Like you could feel the kind of the sound waves hit you from the crowd, and like every time they got a kill, it was just so insane. Like I remember just sat there, just like this is my job. I'm getting paid to do this. This is such a crazy experience. How did it get to this point where I was installing Counter-Strike as a 12-year-old in my bedroom to the point where I'm on stage now? talking about this game in an arena, and I've got this sort of energy coming towards me. That's obviously insane. And then I guess the most important event of my career would be ESL One Cologne 2015. It was the first ever major I did. It was the first ever arena show I did. First time I ever worked with Moses. There was so many different reasons. And I actually told, it was Joe Miller that picked me up to hire that event. He asked me to do it, and I messaged back and said, mate, I don't think I'm ready to even work a major yet. Like, I don't think I should be there. I ended up casting the fucking final of that event. Like, I went from, in the original email, saying I'm too scared to even like commit to working a major, let alone kind of commentating in the arena. I ended up commentating the final in a TriCast, which I've never done before. I've done a TriCast there with Anders and D-Man, two people I've never casted with ever. And then I'm casting a best of 3 final between Envy and Fnatic, I think it was, and with two people I've never worked with in an arena I'm not comfortable with, in an event I never even wanted to go to in the first place. So in terms of overcoming obstacles and my own kind of inner fears, I guess that was the most important event for me of all time. Not the most exciting.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that push, right? You got to jump in the deep end and do it.
Yeah, that was the deepest of deep ends. Yeah, that was baptism by fire for sure. Jesus Christ, I'd never shit myself so much stepping into that booth for the final, not knowing what the hell was going to happen. Never even done a TriCast before, just giving it a go in a grand final.
That actually reminds me, I did want to ask you about TriCast. So this is one just straight from me. You know, you've spoken a little bit about the TriCasting, and it seems to be something that has been pushed within, you know, the top tier talent from the ESL side of things. We're actually exploring that as well here in Australia with Pilsy and Mac and Karath, so, and myself obviously. So we've actually really enjoyed it, and I feel like it's actually quite a good sort of a system. But what's your take on this TriCast situation? It seemed like you guys were actually trying to make that a thing.
Yeah, Chad and Alex and I obviously were trying to make it a thing. We've been pitching for it like long before the COVID situation. Like, obviously that's been brought in to kind of help out with the, to bring out the workload. Like, obviously there's so many games now, it only makes sense to really do these kind of TriCast situations. But ultimately, before this even came in, Alex, Chad and I had been pitching this for a while. Obviously we live with each other and the whole Lanshin situation, and we obviously try and work with each other as much as we can, and we feel like we have a certain chemistry, and it just has to work. You know, I don't think a TriCast necessarily works in every situation or every group of people, but if you find the right group and they feel like they can make it work and they commit to it and they work on it as a group, there's definitely something to be said that having two main commentators and then someone like Chad, for example, who brings in a slightly more analytical eye, and he's working on stuff on the side and he's kind of bringing in clips and kind of his POV from that side of things. I think it really works. Like, I don't think you don't have to have a strict formula. You got to just freestyle it. And like, Alex and I take the main workload in terms of the commentary. Chad will come in with some banter or some kind of observations or some stats, and I think it's just a good middle ground. And it wouldn't work for every single product for sure, but for pro leagues and some other studio shows, I think it's got some legs to it. I would have liked to have experimented with that idea within an arena. It's a shame I never did. That's one of the biggest regrets I think I have of stepping down from commentary, because we worked really hard on making that product like what it was, and we never got to demonstrate how good it could be in an arena. And I think that's where it really would have shone. Yeah,
that was the plan for the major, right? I think I remember seeing you in an interview say that.
Yeah, for sure. That's every event going forward. That's what we were going to do. Like what you saw at Pro League with Chad and Alex, like that was what we were going to do going forward at most events, with ESL especially. So It's a shame we never got to fruition, but those guys will kill it whatever happens. They're doing a great job with Lauren. It's a shame we never got to do it, but we'll get over it. We've all moved on, and everyone's going to be fine. So it's not a big deal.
Everyone's still earning money and living their life. It's all good. Pilsy, it seems very much in line with what we've been doing in ANZ. You know, you're taking that same role that Sponge seems to be. You're messing around with Skybox, breaking it half the time, and seems to be getting by. I'm enjoying it. I wonder what your thoughts are, and maybe for anyone that hasn't tried a TriCast, what do you think from the more analytical perspective as opposed to the dead set play-by-play commentator?
Well, I mean, the thing with me was I never wanted to be a commentator in the first place. Like, I always wanted to be an analyst, and I went straight from being an in-game leader into being an analyst. And the reason why I became a commentator is because there wasn't any desk work in Australia. So it's good to be able to have an outlet there. I feel like I've lost a lot of those skills, actually. And whenever I see like a player come onto the desk, like we had a player come onto the desk of one of our national tournaments, and it's sad, like when I see a player's perspective again, and I realize just like how much of those skills that I've lost. It's and how much of like seeing the game in the way that like, oh, I know that this certain meta thing is happening right now, and that means that this is coming. You know, you fall out of that a little bit, and you go and work more on the commentary aspect of it. But I think the TriCast has been a good way to sort of rediscover some of that and add a bit of a different dimension that I think the broadcast has been lacking like for a long time. Like, it is sort of just like, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world to like focus on the frags and stuff like that, but we've lacked a lot of tools that other games do a lot better for a long time, of like breaking down strategies, or like I like to use Skybox to like not just watch the executes a lot of the time, but even just like there's a tack pause or something. And I remember there was this one round where we had someone walk through mid doors on Dust 2 and catch another team off guard, and I was able to go back in Skybox and show that, oh, the player that should have been holding mid doors turned away and watched the flank, and then the other guy that was watching mid doors dropped the bomb at that exact second that he pushed. And you could go back and see those finer details and actually go and show them. And it's something that you never would have got from the original broadcasting. You never would have seen that perspective. And just having the tools and having the extra time and as that third person to be able to go and break some of those things down, I think that that's something that's lacked a lot in broadcast for a long time. And I'm keen to try and keep experimenting with them all.
I think it's also incredibly beneficial to have someone with the ability to go back in time that understands the game, because you obviously have your replay operators and that kind of thing, but 9 times out of 10, they are just someone from the production crew. They know, okay, I get the 3K, I get the 4K, I hear the caster scream, I get that on the replay, but to bring it up in the moment and to understand contextually how important what you've just described, for example, would be, is not something that a replay operator, you know, your standard run-of-the-mill replay operator is going to be able to do. Yeah. So you get those kinds of moments a lot easier.
Even just the replays, like, it's not enough a lot of the time, because it's focused on the frags. Like, a lot of the time it's like, oh, I'm watching this specific smoke that was thrown at this time or for this reason, or I'm able to go to, like, you know, you see like 131s or something like that, and a lurk player is like holding long heart and he dies, but it gets missed because there's a fight happening somewhere else at the same time. It's like you can add so much context with the tools that we have, and, you know, TriCast gives you that extra time to be able to explore that a bit more, rather than just filling off your dome or something like that. You actually are able to add something of a different kind of substance. I won't say it's more or less important, but it's something different at least than what we've seen for a long time.
All right, I got a couple more questions and then we're done. So one serious one meme one, Bleh or Pilski. If you've got one in the meanwhile, we can, you know, get to that in just a second. So think of one if you've got one. If not, we're getting toward the end of the episode. So final serious question from me / the viewers. This one's from Foggers. Okay. And this is, I think, going to be a pretty tough one for you, Henry. But maybe we can make it easier if you can't answer it. Any standout names from the AU scene outside of the current top 4? So that would be outside of the top 4 teams. Do you notice any, or have you not watched any games?
Dude, I fucking... You gotta throw me under the bus on that one, man.
Henry, man, can you please name the teams under the top 4?
You got to give these guys something.
In the top 4, to be honest with you. I was like, for fuck's sake.
You just got to quickly go on HLTV, say someone's name, make their day. You know, that's all
I'll tell you what, you guys answer it first. I'll listen to your reasons and I'll give my verdict at the end. Why don't you tell me who you would choose, and I'll listen to what you've got, because I couldn't tell you one.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of hype around the Rooster roster, although we haven't seen them playing lately in a lot of these tournaments because of the whole invite situation. Chiefs are the ones that are now getting the invites instead of Rooster. So Netic and Chelios would probably be 2 from my perspective. And I even think, from what I've heard around the place, Chelios has had some offers from some teams overseas. Now, I can't, you know, corroborate that. That's hearsay, sort of. It could be total bullshit, but he's definitely someone that everyone was sort of hyped around, you know, in 2019. Netic's definitely been putting up numbers in 2020, as we saw earlier on in the year, Pilski. And the other one, I suppose, to sort of throw in the mix, although he is now on a top 4 team, I guess, would be Vexite, who did just turn 16 and can now play in the top 4 teams. But from what we've actually seen from Vexite so far in Chiefs, I haven't thought that he's sort of set the world on fire. So, Pilski, maybe you're better off answering this question if you've got any other players in mind than what I do.
Look, yeah, I'd probably just be repeating myself from other episodes, and you'll probably hear us talk about it in other episodes. So I wanted to kind of retool the question for Henry a little bit, which is just that look, HLTV has rating systems where you go look at the top rated players in the world, and you'll see sometimes Asian players on there or Australian players on there. Sure. Do those guys ever catch your eye? And do you ever think to yourself, oh, I'm going to click on this guy's page and see what he's about, or I'm going to, maybe catch one of his games and see how he plays, or look for some of his highlights or something like that? Is that something you ever do?
You haven't had one of those, like, go back to the discussion we had at the start of the show. You haven't had one of those players that's really leaped off the page in a couple of years now. You haven't had one of those names since Bntet that's kind of gone, wow, okay, his stats really speak for themselves. So he's like got a crack of like causing a den if he came over. Like, we know he can speak English. Like, there hasn't been one of those boys in a while. And like, I'm not saying there's only good players. It just hasn't been anyone stand out. And for me, someone who's taken a step back from Counter-Strike, obviously when I quit commentary, I stopped watching as much. So I wanted to get away from it all. So yeah, if I do ever watch and to be honest as well, I don't watch half as much CS right now because of online CS. I don't find it entertaining. Like, as bad as I used to say, I don't find it as entertaining as it once was to watch. Like, it doesn't do it for me, especially when we're watching the same teams every week play the same game in the same tournaments pretty much. It just doesn't do it for me. Like, I'll watch the finals, I'll watch the playoff runs, but I'm not watching the group stages. So for me to justify watching Asian CS, which really has no ramifications on what I'm doing as a GM or a commentator now, no, there hasn't been anyone that's like kind of caught my eye, to answer your question. So as sad as it is to say, I can only be real and transparent. That's sort of my thing. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm sorry.
Well, bad luck, Foggers. He doesn't know who you are. Yeah. So I don't know what you were hoping for with that one, but there you go.
I feel bad now.
I've got one more meme question, but if Pilsy or Bleh, if you've got a real question here before we do the shitpost question, then go ahead. Nothing. All right. Well, then the final question here, and Henry, I do have to preface this by asking you if you know what a chicken parmigiana is.
Yeah, it's battered chicken with cheese on top, maybe some accompanying salads, some fries. Maybe is that correct?
Yeah. Have you had one before, or because it's a big deal in Australia?
Yeah, I've had it in Australia before. Yeah, I've been to Australia outside of IEM as well. Right. I've had chicken parmesan before. Okay. Definitely.
So it's definitely a staple pub food here in Australia. And it's quite a hot topic. There's a bit of a debate as to what the contracted name of chicken parmigiana should be. Because, as Australians, we always like to chop the end off of a word and we call ourselves Aussies, whatever. So do you believe that chicken parmigiana should be shortened to chicken parmy or chicken parma? And this is a question from Guz.
Parmy, I think. For sure.
Thank you very much.
Parma sounds weird. It does. Parmy goes in line with everything else you guys have got going on out there as well. I love the dialects you guys have got. It's very interesting, to say the least. It's very up there with the British kind of colloquialism we have as well. So yeah, I'll go with Parmy. Is that the general consensus over there? That you said that's the right answer?
That's my consensus, and I think that's Pilsey's consensus as well.
Any favour that you would have lost with the Aussie fans about missing some of the Aussie games? I think you've just gained it all back in one comment.
Oh, thank God for that. Like, as soon as you said it, like Parma just sounded like it was the bait outcome. Parmy is where my heart wants to go, and I'm glad that's where it resides.
Yeah, so look, all I'm going to say is maybe you shouldn't come to IEM Melbourne because everyone south of Sydney calls it Parma. But you probably have gained some of the fans back in Sydney after the whole
Would I
Cassius
have
debacle.
more or less fans in Melbourne? Because in Sydney, they certainly didn't like me. Or was it just a kind of national hate for Henry to wank?
I think it might be a national thing, but Palmy might have increased your stock with the Sydney Siders and the Brisbaneites. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. That's good to know. Well, we'll see in the future if I ever get back there.
Yeah. Well, just remember next time you go to a pub to order a chicken palmy, not a chicken parma. Anyway, that is the end of Geographically Challenged episode 18. Special thank you to our guest, Henry. Let's go with final thoughts from Pilsky first.
Final thoughts from me. Well, most of the people from Oz and Asia that actually watch this already grind a lot of the leagues that we do and watch with me. So for anyone who's on those international games, keep an eye out for me and Elfishguy casting some of the games like a B stream at 4 a.m. in the morning when we're absolutely cooked. I'll tell you why. Because for some reason, whenever we cast some of these overseas games, they chuck us the B stream games that aren't meant to be, that fantastic a lot of the time. And then we end up getting big and sprout. We end up getting some crazy upsets. I don't know what it is, but every international tournament we do, we get some sick games for some reason. So, we must have the touch. That's all I'm saying.
Magic touch from the Aussie boys. All right, Bleh, what about you?
I got a shout out to delusional Tyloo fan on Twitch. The guy's always there watching Tyloo games, just like me. It's not my alt. People think it's my alt. It's not my alt.
Oh, there's actually a guy called that.
Yeah, delusional _ Tyloo _ fan. He's pretty regular in all the Tyloo games. I think he needs help. I hope you find help, friend. Apart from that, yeah, Henry, thanks for joining us. And as usual, as I always say, hire us, you cunts. Not Henry, though. He already has a job, but yeah.
All right, Henry, do you want to have any shout outs or anything like that you want to make?
Not so much. Thank you, boys, so much for having me. I think you guys have got a fun show. It's been a lot of fun coming on here and learning about Asian Counter-Strike. I never come on and pretend I know things that I don't. So I've learned a lot here. I've got my nice session of Asian and Oceanic CS. I feel like I can now go on and spread the knowledge now and hopefully spread the good word that is still alive and well, albeit in a limited capacity. Yeah. Just need to try and get a few more fans out there, and maybe we can bring it back to life. So thanks for having me, boys.
It might be in the iron lung at the moment, but it's still sort of getting along. Anyway, very much appreciate you coming on the show. That's been Geographically Challenged episode 18, and you can follow us all. Twitters are down there on our names. You can follow me on Twitch. You can follow me on YouTube. Do all those things. Comment, like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah.
OnlyFans.
Patreon. I like money, and that would be very much appreciated if you could do that. And also make sure you hire us, particularly if you've got an Asian event, because straight from the horse's mouth, we know everything, apparently.
True. Great. They do. They really do. I would hire them if I could. I'll say that much.
All right. Well, that's all we're going to need. And with that, we'll end the show.